I didn't get the house because I was rich or lucky. No, I got it because no one else wanted it. At a back tax auction, it sat at the very end of the list. 245 Blackwater Street, Providence, RI, former institutional property, encumbrances, unpaid waste disposal fees, health code violations, sold as is, cash only. The auctioneer's tone made it sound like a joke. The room was noisy. Guys in plaid jackets arguing over warehouses, women with laptops negotiating with realtors. But when this property came up, the energy died. I raised my paddle almost without thinking. The price was absurd, less than an old boat with a hole in the hull. My plan was simple: film an urban exploration video, cash in on views, and maybe resell. The place looked like pure content gold. I first saw the house at dusk. Blackwater Street curved away from a neat residential block into a dead-end road where the Woonsocket River made a lazy loop, its banks slick with dark clay. The house stood as if shoved there by some unseen hand, its face toward the street, its body leaning toward the water. Stone 3 stories tall, with an attic, gargoyle-shaped gutters, and a tall central stair tower like a monastic cell. The front gable bore the peeling inscription, Mercy Alms House, 1906. Later I'd study old maps, but that evening I just noticed the front door frame, warped, like something was pulling from inside. On the porch, yellow-black city seals read, Danger, entry prohibited. From the crack in the door came a draft, cold and sweetly rotten, like the air in an old infectious disease ward. I turned back to my car to get a flashlight and saw a woman standing by the chain-link fence next door. Short, in a dark coat, hair pinned back. She stared without blinking. "You going inside?" she asked flatly. "I'm the owner, just looking, then I'll lock it up," I said. "Lock it tight." She nodded toward the house. "The water's rising again, and it likes when the water comes in." I wanted to ask what liked it, but she turned away as if she'd already said too much. Behind the house, beyond the black ribbon of river, came the low rumble of the old dam. I'd later learn that the dam fed water straight into the basement of the House of Mercy. I recorded my first walkthrough on camera, habit. Inside, it smelled of wet wood, carbolic acid, and iron. As if somewhere below, rusty tools were drying in the dark. The staircase sagged under my weight but held. The corridor still had room numbers on the walls, a faded duty roster. Ward B, 1937, Milk Kitchen, 1924, Sanatorium Ward. A small brass-framed call bell still hung there, rope dangling. I pulled it, and the house answered with an echo too thick, too slow, as if the sound had gone not through air but through something heavier. The old chapel caught the last dusty light, narrow windows with clear diamond panes, a small loft for the choir, a censer hung from a broken chain, framed embroideries on the walls. "Blessed are the meek. Suffer little children to come unto me." 3 rows of pews, one with a sawn-down leg to keep it from rocking, details that spoke of someone's steady hand, long ago. In the altar recess stood a locked wooden cabinet. I touched it, and it rocked as though something had pushed back from inside. My stomach turned cold. The padlock was old, the clasp brittle. It gave with a tug. Inside were stacks of gray-spined notebooks, their covers cold to the touch, and a small brass cross. The first notebook read, Sister Virginia, Duty Log, 1936-1939. I slid it into my backpack. My urban exploration video had just turned into an investigation. On the second floor, rows of iron beds stood bare except for striped canvas mattresses. On one mattress sat a one-eyed teddy bear. The silence was so dense I could hear, far below, as if in a mine, the slow rush of water, a muted roar, then stillness, then again. It was coming from the basement. One last flight led down. The basement greeted me with water. It came up to my ankles, cold as a February river. No light bulb, only a bare socket. I swept the beam of my flashlight across the room and saw rows of dark wooden crates along the walls. Not furniture. Archive boxes, heavy with finger holes cut into their sides. On each, a tin plaque with a number and a date. 217, 1202, 1938, 231, 09-21, 1938. In the corner stood a wheeled metal frame that looked like a gurney and a huge white tank with a spigot. Faded letters on the side read, "Phenolic." I crouched, hugging the flashlight when I heard it. A faint dragging sound, as if someone in the next room was pulling a heavy sack across the floor. The water shivered around my boots. The sound came again, closer, behind a rusted steel door marked "Morgue." I stood, even though my body screamed to turn back. The handle was icy. The door opened 3 inches and stopped, pressed against something soft, springy. I shoved harder. The resistance yielded only a fraction. Through the gap, I saw nothing but darkness and a pale shape, like the corner of a sheet. I backed away toward the stairs, and in that moment something brushed against my ankle, soft, fluid, like the graze of a fish in a pond. On my camera, my voice sounds high and shaky when I curse under my breath. I bolted upstairs, slammed the basement door, and sat in the dusty dining hall, listening to the faint splash of water moving under the floorboards, slow, hesitant, like someone pacing in rubber boots. That night I dreamed of a woman sitting at a table lit by a kerosene lamp. Narrow face, round glasses, blue veins along the backs of her hands. She wrote in small, neat letters, breaking words carefully with dashes. Under the table, water flowed quietly, soaking the hem of her stiff skirt. I checked my backpack in the dream and realized it was Sister Virginia. The logbook was worse than the basement, not because of what it said, but because of the calm with which it said it. January 3rd, 1937. Received 11 souls, 3 children. Dr. Harrow ordered isolation for coughers. Laundry complains of water, rising again. Mr. O'Rourke promises to clear sluice. February 15th, 1937. 3 deaths overnight. Undertaker didn't come. Snowstorm. Following doctor's advice, placed on ice, holds well. September 7, 1938. Water receded. Morgue damp. Moved 14. Marked lids. Too easy to mix. September 21st, 1938. Hurricane. Generator failed in evening. Tried moving upper floor residents to chapel, but stairs collapsed. Laid bodies below. Morgue. Stacked on crates. On the water, organza of candles ran out of copper tags. The September entries came one after another. Steady dates, neat check marks. Sometimes she wrote souls, sometimes bodies, always a tally. The New England hurricane of 1938 had indeed drowned parts of Providence. I'd seen the photos in the library. Boats floating down streets, black water licking at second-story windows. I returned to the house with a printed flood map. Blackwater Street sat right on the blue zone. Probable inundation. The neighbor was at her fence again, watching me unlock the door. "You'll go back down," she said. "Take salt." "What for?" "To stand in a circle and keep your footing," she shrugged, "and so they won't call you." I took the salt, not because I believed her, but to avoid arguing. Still, when I reached the basement, I poured a circle at the foot of the stairs like kids do with sidewalk chalk. Silly, stupid, but it made me feel lighter. This time the morgue door opened freely. Inside, the air was heavier. The walls were tiled, dusted with white salt as if with frost. Along the floor were low steel tables in 2 rows, empty now. At the far wall stood the crates, the fingerhole boxes. Each had its tin tag. One tag shone newer, brass catching the light. 231, Draws 9-21, 1938. It matched the logbook. I reached toward it and felt the water stir again, as if tugged gently. From the dark corner came that same measured tapping, tuck, tuck, like a fingernail on wood. Regular, patient. "There's no one here," I said aloud. "It's the water, a pipe." That's what you say when you really want it to be true. Sister Virginia's entries ended abruptly. October 2nd, 1938. Laundry maid Mary disappeared. Kitchen girl said she walked toward Blackwater, found her bucket by the water. Doctor's hand shook when he signed. October 5th, 1938. Lid of number 231 damp again. Turned tag over. Placed other sack inside. October 12th, 1938. 2 children coughing. Doctor says, Don't move them down. No space. Chapel damp. Salt streaks on walls. Placed near morgue. October 13th, 1938. Heard bell at night. From where? Hall bell. Who pulled? Doors were locked. And the last, October 16th, 1938. If you read this, take tag number 231 to the chapel and leave the water below. He needs the water to flow. He doesn't like it dry. And dry is for the icons. Tucked into the fold was a thin yellow tag with a string loop. The air in the room suddenly felt tighter. I went up to the chapel and set the tag on the altar. Then I sat there a long while, listening to the house breathe. Soft, like clothes shifting on a hanger. That night I got a call from a neighbor's number. The voice was male, rough. "This your house?" "Yes." "You the one down there all day?" "Yes." "Then listen. Don't leave it empty at night. Bell rings. If no one answers, they go to the water. We saw it back in '77 when they shut it after the fire. They went out at night. They found them later downriver under the bridge. All had tags on their necks. Not the right kind of tags. The line went dead. I called back. Number not in service. A prank maybe, or some old-timer rambling. But the next day I brought a cot, a thermos, and stayed the night in the chapel. Not because I believed him, because it was easier to check than to wonder. The bell rang at 2:17 a.m. Once. I woke instantly without that thick fog between sleep and waking. In the corridor, the dark felt heavy. On the first landing of the stairs, a wet smear on the wall, as though someone had run their hand along it. I went down to the basement door. From under it came a faint whisper. Not quite a voice, more like the white noise of a radio between stations. I opened the door. It wasn't whispering. It was the shuffle of water against stone. Down there, it was lighter than by day. A dim gray glow like moonlight on snow. It seeped from the crack under the morgue door, as if someone inside had wrapped a lamp in cloth and set it on the floor. I went closer. The light climbed up the salted walls in thin veins, like frost on glass. Inside, on the tables, lay 5 body bags. 3 of them hadn't been there earlier. One bag twitched slightly, slow, careful, like someone turning over on a squeaky bed, not wanting to wake the person next to them. I froze. Then my eyes found the yellow tag, Ladrone 231, resting on that bag. From the corner with the crates came the tuck, tuck, again. The water rippled. One crate was shifted just a finger's width out of place, and from under its lid trickled a thin stream of water. I did the one thing I shouldn't have. I lifted the lid. Inside, no who, a what. First, burlap wet greenish gray. Under that, pale skin, parchment thin, bound with twine. What I thought was stuffing turned out to be planks wrapped in canvas, as if something inside had to be pressed in place. In the center, a hollow where water dripped down and seeped back out in invisible ripples. And from that hollow came the sound, not knocking, but breathing. Slow, even, testing the rhythm with a fingertip. I dropped the lid and stepped back, hitting a table. Bags rustled, one slid off and landed with a wet thud. The bell in the corridor jerked, rang once, then stopped. I ran up the stairs and locked myself in the chapel. Behind the door, all was still. Only far below, something moved in the water, soft, like a fish. The next day, I went to the neighbor at the fence. She opened her door without asking who it was. "Tonight? Yes," she said. "We saw, we heard." "What is it?" "Water," she answered. "They didn't leave when the hurricane came. They put them down there. They got used to the water. We're in the lowlands here, the floodplain. People always thought, we'll wait, it'll drain. But it never drains all the way. The water remembers." "Who are they?" "Patients. Patients, not the word. Orphans, paupers, old folks without names. People with no burial. The city books call them unclaimed. There's a potter's field out by the highway for the poor. But in those weeks there were no wagons, the whole city was sick, the undertaker was stuck in the flood. They put them on ice, on salt. And the tags got mixed. He doesn't like when the tags get mixed." "He?" She looked straight at me. "The well, under the house, they gave it a name to make it easier. Some call it the morgue. Some call it the sink. I call it the well. It likes water, those tags, the count. If you want it to leave you alone, she raised a finger. Don't count by voices, count by water. However many wet steps there are, that's how many nights you have. I realized I was standing on dangerous ground, but her nonsense fit too well with the facts in the logbook, and the facts matched the sounds and the salt. In the Providence Public Library archive, I found little funding requests for Mercy Almshouse in 1905-06, 2 clippings about its conversion into a sanitary facility in 1922, and a short hurricane damage report from 1938. Partial basement flooding, heating plant damaged. There was more on the 1977 fire, a brief column about staff evacuation and closure for health code non-compliance. Not a word about a morgue, tags, or water reaching the street. But I did find a photograph. 3 women in white caps with a bucket at the edge of Blackwater Street. Water to their ankles, the house behind them. The caption read, "Mercy Sisters pumping out water, October 1938. One of them, round glasses, thin fingers, looked like Sister Virginia. Or maybe I just wanted it to be her. Sometimes we choose coincidences because we need something to believe in. I returned to the house in daylight. The basement water had receded. Maybe the dam gate had been opened upstream. White salt lines marked the walls. On the tables, nothing. The crate I had opened was back in place, lid snug, but its tag had turned slightly, facing the corner where I now noticed a small square niche in the wall, black inside like a swallow's nest. I shone my light inside and saw a rusted grate, an old drain. This must have been what fed the well. I pulled the grate free and looked deeper. The channel didn't go far, maybe 5 feet. In the mud and damp rags lay several yellow tags. One was almost new, or so it looked under the salt. Number 0, no number, just 0. Under it, nothing, blank. I pried it up with my knife. It didn't smell of water or mildew. It smelled like the viewing rooms at crematoriums, rose soap and cherry air freshener. A modern smell in an old house. "He started the count over," the neighbor said when I showed her. "That's bad. When he loses count, he calls." Calls who? Those nearby, those who listen. I didn't sleep in the house for 2 nights. On the 3rd, I came back with a tripod, 2 cameras, a motion sensor, and an audio recorder. I knew I was turning real tragedy, the story of the unlucky and forgotten, into horror content. But without a recording, it would all sound like madness. I set 1 camera in the corridor on the bell, the other in the basement aimed at the morgue. The recorder I placed on the stairs. In the chapel, I made a salt ring and sat inside it. At 1:50, a faint draft passed through the corridor. The bell swayed just slightly. At 2:06, the basement glowed. Same gray light as before, quiet and hazy. At 2:12, the motion sensor clicked. Movement in the morgue. I switched on my flashlight and went down. The water was higher than the last night, over my ankles. In the morgue, 5 bags. 1 lay on the floor. 3 crates had been shifted. 1 by a finger's width, 1 by a hand's, 1 by half a step. Thin trickles of water seeped from under each lid. The sound came. Tock, tock, tock. Steady, unhurried. I stood in the doorway so the camera could see me and the tables. Then, from the niche in the wall, a rat shot out, splashing into the water. I jumped. The mic caught my curse. Then the bell rang. Not once, not 3 times, over and over, fast, urgent like an alarm. The water rippled toward me. No fish this time. Steps, each ripple like a footprint. Invisible, but I could feel them. I started counting aloud so I wouldn't lose track. 1, 2, 3. And the ripples stopped, turned, headed for the stairs. Climbing. On the 3rd step, they vanished. I followed. In the corridor, silence. The bell hung still. But outside the chapel, on the dry floor, inside my salt circle, a dark, wet line, like the trace of a hem. "How many steps?" the neighbor asked later. 3. "Then you have 3 nights," she said. "After that, it's not your business anymore." "Whose business?" She looked toward the river, where black water swelled under the dam. "The rivers. She takes the ones who can't keep up. I'm not a fan of mystical bargains, but I do believe in agreements you can keep. If 3 nights was the rule, Then 3 nights it would be. On the first, I stayed in the chapel, slept an hour at a time, waking to listen. The bell stayed silent. The water below murmured softly, like silk shifting over shoulders. On the second, I sat at the top of the stairs holding tag Zaro in my hand. It felt warmer than it should. I didn't go down. On the third, I placed a bucket at the basement door. Not for water, for whatever I thought was walking there. I wanted to give it a way out without me having to go in. Foolish, I know. But sometimes any ritual is worth it if it makes you feel in control. At 3 a.m., something pushed the door from the inside. The bucket rattled, tipped over. A thin stream of water slid across the floor, right into my salt circle, then stopped an inch from my boots, soaking into the boards, leaving a white trace. However many wet steps there are, that's how many nights you stay. I realized it wasn't 3 nights, it was 3 steps, and the last step was right at the door. I scooped salt and flung it. The water hissed like acid. For a moment I thought it wasn't water at all, but breath, burning away. "I'm not yours," I said. "I'm not one of them. I won't leave you empty." The basement door swayed gently, like a cradle being rocked, unsure but persistent. "I'll come back," I added. But not alone. And not at night. In the morning, I called the Department of Health and the Historic Commission. I told them about possible human remains, sanitation violations, and flooding hazards. Those phrases get officials talking faster. By noon, 2 arrived. A hard hat-wearing engineer and a woman from the Heritage Committee. They listened briefly, wrote concisely. In the basement, the engineer tapped pipes. The phenolic tank the empty crates. The woman ran her hand over the salted chapel wall, where white streaks hung like frozen tears. "We'll have to seal it," she said. "Cut off the water, remove anything requiring cataloging, close it for the season. And if there are," I hesitated, "remains, then they'll be moved to the potter's field," she said evenly. "The city has space. And if the water still comes in," the engineer smirked, "then we'll stop it. There are ways." He chalked a diagram near the drain niche. Cap, backflow valve, drainage pipe. Practical, rational. But behind me, the bell in the corridor rang once. The woman glanced up. "Wind," she said. Work was set for Friday. On Thursday, a light rain fell. By evening, the river was dark as oil. That night, the wind picked up, not a hurricane, but the kind that makes old houses talk to each other in drafts. I drove to Blackwater Street to check if the windows were shut. The neighbor stood on the porch. "Not tonight," she said. "Tonight it'll call. They're coming to seal it tomorrow. That's why, tonight." Inside, the corridor smelled of salt water. Strange, since we were far from the sea. The bell was gone from its bracket, lying neatly on its side. Downstairs, the light again. Gray, soft. The water was higher than I'd ever seen, up to my knees. The tapping echoed steady from the crates, the tables, the walls. But now there was another sound, soft, like someone whispering in a language I didn't know. In the morgue, the tables held many bags. I didn't count. Counting mattered. I saw the yellow tag Irazero in my hand, and the drain niche. The water seeped as usual, but on the edge sat a rat, wet, bedraggled, licking its paws. It watched me like a neighbor on a landing. "They'll take you out tomorrow," I said. "They'll close it." The rat leapt, not at me, but into the water. And the water didn't splash. It only darkened as if ink had been poured in. Then the bell rang. Not once, not thrice, but frantically, like a fire alarm. And this time the ringing came from above and below, as if there were another bell in the depths. The water surged upward, thin walls climbing the stairs. It stopped at the salt, hissed, then slid sideways to the wall where the engineer had chalked his plan. It erased it like a sponge. "I'm not coming tomorrow," I said, realizing I was speaking to neither water nor house. "I'm coming now." I grabbed the bucket, plunged it into the water, carried it upstairs, and dumped it into the old kitchen sink. Pointless. The bare walls drank it like bread soaks milk. I hauled load after load until my shoulders burned and my hands went slick. The level didn't drop. The water moved like it was amused, shifting at the stairs like a cat needing a windowsill. The neighbor came herself. She brought sandbags from somewhere and stacked them at the basement door. "That won't stop it," I said. "No," she replied, "but it shows where the shore is. Sometimes it cares about lines." We stayed until dawn. When light came, the water had dropped, a hand's width. The sound was gone. The bell was silent. We didn't speak again. On Friday, the work crews came. They installed the cap, fitted the valve, sealed the niche with mortar. They carried out the tables, loaded the crates into a van, both the empty ones and the ones still packed. The woman from the Heritage Committee photographed each tag, then placed them carefully into a plastic evidence bag. The Ashoro tag in my pocket suddenly felt light, dry like a fallen leaf. I understood. It no longer weighed anything. The engineer tapped the wall. "It'll hold." "It'll hold," I echoed. The house seemed quieter. By evening, when everyone left, I stayed in the chapel. The light was soft, like in old photographs. I opened Sister Virginia's log to the last page and set the brass cross on it. "He needs the water to flow. He doesn't like it dry." "I'm sorry," I said, "and thank you." Then, for the last time, the bell rang. Once. Courteous. Like a farewell. And fell silent. 3 months later, the city reinterred the unidentified remains from the crates in Potter's Field. Not all. Some turned out to be empty burlap sacks filled with salt and planks. The report called them non-verifiable artifacts. The woman from the committee sent me a scan of a brief note. As of October 1938, 23 deaths recorded at Mercy Almshouse. Burial records absent. The neighbor by the fence no longer came out at night. We sometimes met at the mailboxes. "Quiet?" I'd ask. "Quiet," she'd answer. I sold the house, not at a big profit but without a loss. The new owners, a young couple, planned to open an art school there. They said the chapel had beautiful light. They wanted to use the basement for workshops. I didn't tell them about the water. Not because I wanted to hide it, because some stories belong in the archives, not in the oral tradition. In March, I was back in Providence on business and walked to Blackwater Street. The river murmured as before. The house stood straighter, as if unseen hands had adjusted it. The couple had hung a new porch light, warm with amber glass. Through the chapel window I saw easels. I lingered at the fence, feeling in my chest the echo of one last, uninvited ding. On the way back, I stopped at the library. On the historical display was a new card, Mercy Almshouse, in operation 1906-1977, flooded during 1938 hurricane, partial restoration and preservation, 2025. Next to it, a photograph, 3 women with a bucket in the floodwater. I leaned closer. Around the neck of one, small like a pendant, was a tag. In a 1938 photo, it could have been anything, but to me it looked like the number 231. That night I dreamed of water. Not as a threat, but as memory. Water tracing bags with lines of salt, running down tile into the niche, counting in its own way. I woke with the feeling someone was standing at the door. In the hallway, no one. Only on the doormat, neat as a calling card, lay a yellow tag. I picked it up, blank on the front. On the back, a faint dusting of salt. I set it on the table and understood. The story was over. But in Gothic tales, endings aren't closures. They're a kind of stillness. A stillness with room for water, salt, and counting. And in that stillness, if you listen closely, there's always one last, gentle ring, signaling that somewhere, someone has finally reached the shore.